Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Will's Movie Log. Today, I'm coming at you with a review of MaXXXine, the latest horror movie written and directed by Ty West, and the latest movie in the incredibly popular X franchise. Up until this point, this series has been known mainly for two things. The first being Ty West's ability to capture the look, texture, and feel of different eras of filmmaking, and also the lead actress Mia Goth's ability to craft these very memorable and iconic characters and performances, most notably in Pearl. At this point, I've reviewed both X and Pearl on my channel, and while what with all the 70s, 80s, and now 90s pastiche that we see nowadays, it was nice to see somebody direct that same approach and that same gaze to the 1950s era of Technicolor, which I feel doesn't get enough attention. Um, I actually thought X did a better job of capturing the scuzzy, grimy feel of the era that it was paying homage to. So we had X, which was an homage to the 1970s backwoods slasher, and then we had Pearl, which was an homage to the 1950s Technicolor film filtered through a horror nightmare lens. And it just kind of felt inevitable that that would bring us eventually to the very rich and stylized world of the 1980s. Now, I will say I've never been the biggest fan of this series. But I will say I am a big fan of another movie that Ty West directed called House of the Devil, which is another homage to the 1980s. It came out in 2009, and it was sort of done in the style of an early 80s kind of haunted house, survive the night thriller, and it brilliantly captures sort of the richness and the feel of that decade of horror, and it's also one of the few horror movies that I find truly frightening. So, given what I think is a pretty mixed batting average on Ty's part, I'm not going to say that I went into this cautiously optimistic, but I was curious to see how he was going to handle going back to the decade of filmmaking that sort of put him on the map in the first place. And maybe it's reductive to compare MaXXXine to House of the Devil, since one is sort of a urban giallo style mystery and the other is, sort of a satanic panic horror house, haunted house kind of survive the night slasher. But this is a very specific decade of filmmaking that we're talking about here. Unfortunately, the results were pretty disappointing. In terms of the look and feel of this movie, I actually do think it is one of its more redeeming qualities just because of how gorgeous it looks a lot of the time. I mean, there's a lot of nods to 80s lighting and fog, and I also found the face molding scene to be incredibly gorgeous, but gorgeous in a very grotesque and horrifying way. And I mean, that to me is hands down the best scene of the movie. Like, if every scene was like that, we would have potential movie of the year material in our hands. But I also don't think that MaXXXine does capture the richness and texture of the 1980s as successfully as House of the Devil does. And I don't want to review this movie or judge it entirely based on how well it does pastiche or how well it does the thing that this other movie was trying to do. That feels reductive to me, and I have sort of mixed feelings about movies that do pastiche in the first place. But what's really annoying to me is Ty West basically insists on it. He insists on you making those comparisons, not just by making a movie that is a love letter to a certain decade of horror, but that constantly nods in the direction of other, sort of staples in film history, like Psycho, like Chinatown, like just the filmmaking industry itself. It wants you to make those comparisons. To what purpose? I don't really know. And I didn't really know with X, and I didn't really know with Pearl, but I cut those movies some slack because at least they were entertaining. This is still kind of entertaining, but the shtick is really starting to wear out for me. Maybe the point here is that every character's life and behavior and motivations are sort of filtered through the world of film, um, which I actually really like in theory, but it doesn't really work when you have characters who are this flat. You have Elizabeth Debicki's character, who is clearly trying to be the next Hitchcock, but sort of has a complex because she is a female trying to make a movie in, the 1980s, which I understand could give her character a lot of depth, but then she just kind of comes off as this one-dimensional ballbuster. You've also got Kevin Bacon's character, who is this very sleazy and inept kind of flip side of Jack Nicholson's character in Chinatown, which didn't really do it for me either, but I mean, it does make his death towards the end of the movie more funny and dark when you kind of look at it in that context. So, I don't know. I mean, I think that the story and pacing are pretty lifeless. I think that the references to film and film history are kind of hollow and just kind of annoy me the more I try to interrogate them. I think that the ending is some corny Reddit atheist bullshit. I mean, Christian fundamentalists, it's like that's just the lowest hanging fruit as far as I'm concerned. And if anything, actually think that this kind of serves as a reminder about what a more interesting character Pearl is than Maxine. Now, did I hate it? No, I wouldn't say that. I found it mildly entertaining. I thought it looked really nice. And I think that there was just enough substance here to bring me back to it farther down the road. But I don't know. As of now, I would say it stands at 2 out of 5 stars. And that's it. Those are my thoughts on Maxine. What did you think of the movie? How do you think it stacks up to the other two movies in the X series? How do you feel about the X series in general? And yeah, that's pretty much it. What other 80s horror movies should you watch instead of this? Fuck, I don't know. Drop your favorite 80s horror in the comments down below. Um, and that's it. Like, subscribe, comment. That's the most important thing. Get the discourse going. And yeah, until then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.